Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. In this week's video, I want to tell you about one of my favorite lenses for full-frame RF mount Canon mirrorless cameras. A lens that is so good that Canon won't even let you buy it. What is this mystery lens that I'm talking about? Well, before I tell you, I want to list off a few of its characteristics, and you should let me know down in the comments what you think this lens costs today in 2026. So to get started, it's an 85mm prime, so great for portraits, things like that, maybe even the occasional landscape. It is an f1.4 maximum aperture, so very, very bright, almost L lens quality at 1.2 aperture, but not quite. It is fully weather sealed, including a gasket at the rear mount, and I think 6 other locations throughout the lens. And it, as an RF mount lens, has electrical contacts and full autofocus control. So you just snap it right onto your Canon full-frame mirrorless body or an APS-C body, and it's gonna work flawlessly in terms of autofocus, aperture control, things like that. And yeah, I think that's just about it. I think the only thing I left out is that it's made by a third party. So how much do you think this lens costs? If it were a Canon lens, like the 85mm VCM lens, then well, it's gonna cost an arm or a leg. It was the 85 f2, well, that's a bit more reasonable, but still really expensive. This lens cost me in 2022, $700. And today in 2026, you can buy it for $500. So what is this lens? It's right here. The Samyang 85mm f1.4 AF, and AF stands for autofocus. So let's talk about a few of the things that I really like about this lens and maybe a couple things that I don't, and why Canon is trying to get in the way of you buying one. First of all, what I love most about this lens, actually let's start with the negatives because I can see it right now. This lens is a fingerprint magnet. It is not particularly humid in my garage right now, and of course you can see basically every single fingerprint on this thing, but that's because it is an all metal construction. Right here, the entire lens barrel, that is all nice metal. Everything on this is metal except for the lens hood and the lens cap, so you really can't ask for better in terms of build quality. There is that fabled RF mount right here on the back with electrical contacts and a weather sealing gasket right there. You have a nice, soft, clicky autofocus, manual focus switch right there. You will not find a control ring on this or any sort of buttons, but you do have an extremely smooth turning. I'm not sure if you can hear that. Manual focus ring, which is great when you're dealing with something that has as shallow a depth of field as 85 1.4 does. Let me put this lens cap back on. You have a really curious burnt orange ring right here. It is not a red ring. I'm sure Samyang would tell you that. You have a wonderful lens hood, which comes with it, and it doesn't cost you an extra 60 bucks like so many Canon lenses do these days. Of course, a lens cap. And then I do have a filter on the front of this, but a gorgeous front element right there. And it is a, let's see if it lists it. It is a 77mm size filter thread. So big old fat element on the front. Let me see if I can get you a shot looking all the way through it. There you go. You can kind of see through the lens right there. So this lens, as you can see, is actually surprisingly compact and really not gigantic. 77mm is decently large, but for an f1.4 lens is surprisingly lightweight, especially when you consider that, yes, it is weather sealed. Gaskets at the front, all the way through the manual focusing ring and at the back, and a few gaskets internally as well. And man, for a lens as bright as this is, it is large in diameter, but not nearly as heavy as you would think that it is. Those are the physical characteristics of this lens, but what I really want to talk to you about is not what it's like to hold this lens in your hand, but more what it's like to actually shoot this lens and what I love so much about the images coming out of this lens. In a word, the images coming out of this lens are just downright beautiful. They are tack sharp in the middle and even towards the edges. They have a beautiful swirly bokeh effect, and because this has a solid autofocus system inside of it, they are just beautifully sharp every single time. Now there is a weird little, let's just call it a defect or a quirk, where when you first turn on this lens, if you're in autofocus mode, it will sometimes quickly go into manual focus for about a second and then switch back into autofocus. But man, once you are back in autofocus, you can trust this thing to nail focus. I've used it on paid shoots like weddings, engagements, and graduations, but I've also used it, for example, in Hawaii. I would go to the dog shelter basically every Saturday and photograph the dogs there at the Humane Society, and they would use those photos to help the dogs get adopted. And if you ever want to test the autofocus system on a lens, use that lens to shoot anxious, frenetic shelter dogs running around in the grass because they're finally free. And on a body, no less, like the EOS R, that doesn't have animal eye detect whatsoever. It only has people, human eye detect. Even with that suboptimal setup, in 2022, I was able to just crush those photos and get some really solid images that helped those dogs get adopted, and every single one of them was tack sharp where I had my focus point. On a more modern body, like my new R6 Mark II, or even the R7 that I have that have animal eye detect, this thing is incredible for dog and animal portraits as much as it is for people portraits. Like any 85 1.4, your backgrounds are going to be buttery smooth, but as I said, what I really love about this lens is that the bokeh has a slight cat's eye effect, and that produces a swirly bokeh that really draws your eye into your central subject. And between the autofocus system and the quality of glass used in this lens, that central subject is tack sharp every single time. That said, I don't want you thinking that this is just a portrait lens. In fact, I have used this lens for landscapes as well. Stop this down to f8 and you're going to get beautiful, sharp landscape images. I also have used this on my R7 in my local forest as an f1.4 lens. I can take this out here in the Pacific Northwest winter where there's basically no sunlight and still take beautiful images of wildflowers as they pop out finally in springtime here in our local forest. And man, they're gorgeous images that come off of this. As I said, it is one of my favorite RF lenses, and really that comes down entirely to the quality of images that I get off of this. I am super, super happy with them, and I'm never, ever selling this lens. So I think I've preached enough about how much I love this lens and the images that it produces, but what I want to tell you is why Canon won't let you have this lens and what they did to kill this lens all the way back in 2022. First of all, it comes down to this RF mount right in the back, and more specifically, these electrical contacts. The manufacturer of this lens, and by the way, if you see a version of this lens labeled as Rokinon, it's the exact same lens, just rebranded for a different market. These electrical contacts, the autofocus, the manufacturer reverse engineered that. And in doing so, they essentially stole Canon's intellectual property, or at the very least, were using it without paying a licensing fee to Canon. And this was very early on in the development of Canon's RF mount ecosystem, and Canon had nothing that could come anything close to this lens except for maybe the 28 to 70, which cost $3,000 and still does in 2026. So what did they do? They sued Samyang, and they literally forced them to pull these lenses off the shelf and not be allowed to sell them new. If you shoot another body like or another mount like Sony, you can buy these lenses, and Sony had no issue with this. But Canon, they did not like that this lens was a home run and that there was such a cult following developing around it because of all the reasons we talked about. It's cheap, it produces beautiful images, and it's just a joy to shoot. But unfortunately, today in 2026, it is still the case that third-party RF mount full-frame lenses with autofocus are not a thing. And personally, while other people speculate in more hopeful ways, I don't think that that's ever going to change, at least not anytime in the next 5 to 10 years. I think Canon's going to keep us in this walled garden. And what happened to this lens, what happened to Samyang and Rokinon is basically, or was, the start of that. It's unfortunate. It's the world that we live in. If you want a lens that compares to this, you're looking at the 85 1.4, and you better be ready to pay through the nose for it. But lenses like this that are affordable and that are fun to shoot and produce beautiful images, it's lenses like this that bring people back to photography, or when they're in a slump, teach them how to enjoy photography again. And I think it's a shame that Canon keeps us from being able to access lenses like this, because not everyone has VCM lens money. I am very, very grateful to have a copy of this lens, and you should go out and find a used copy of this lens if you're shooting on Canon RF mount. I can promise you that you are going to enjoy it. Let me know down in the comments what you think about the images, about this lens, whether or not you're on the hunt to find one. They are out there, you can find them, and they aren't that expensive. They are cheaper than other lenses like the 45 1.2, or at least right around the same price for, frankly, way better image quality. So anyways, that's all I got for you this week. I know it was a bit of, I don't know, a love story, if you will, or maybe a whinge fest about this lens. But either way, I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next week.